In the 9 days leading up to the invasion of Ukraine, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov described warnings of a Russian attack as information terrorism. He also referred to information about plans to seize Kyiv as a paranoid scenario. After 2 years of full-scale war, which the Kremlin initially denied, Putin now dismisses the possibility of an attack on Europe as nonsense and drivel. To grasp the true meaning of these words, it's necessary to scrutinize previous statements made by the Russian authorities and their propaganda. Find out in the context what plans the Kremlin is talking about out loud and what to expect from Moscow. Putin's assertion of Russia's reluctance to engage in conflict with Europe and NATO might have been welcomed as good news, were it not for Putin's habit of lying. On the 27th of February 2014, military personnel wearing no identifiable insignia obstructed Ukrainian military units, the administrative border of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, and seized administrative buildings in Crimea. They were observed speaking Russian and wearing clothing similar to Russian camouflage. During another press conference in the midst of the Crimean seizure, Putin faced a direct question about whether the armed individuals in Crimea were Russian soldiers. The Russian president bluntly replied that they were self-defense units. He added cynically that similar uniforms could easily be bought in any military store. However, a year later, in a film addressing the occupation of the peninsula, Putin admitted that he personally ordered the deployment of Russian troops to Crimea. This is not the only instance where the Russian president has cynically altered his testimony. For years, Putin has vehemently denied any connection between the state and the private military contractor Wagner, despite its public emergence during the conflict in Ukraine. In June 2023, during a meeting with the military, Putin surprisingly admitted that the Wagner PMC was entirely funded by the Russian state budget. It appears that all of the Russian president's previous statements were false. If Putin's words cannot be trusted, how can we discern the true intentions of Russia and its leadership? Let's start by analyzing the statements made by top Kremlin's officials in the run-up to the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Then we'll compare them with current statements and events. In December 2021, Russia proposed to the West to sign what it called security guarantees. These agreements included 2 separate treaties with NATO and the United States, outlining Russia's perspective on the division of the world. In the draft treaty with the United States, Article 4 is particularly noteworthy. Here, Russia demands that the United States refrain from admitting countries that were formerly part of the USSR to NATO. The Russian authorities demanded that NATO not accept Ukraine as a member. They also insisted that NATO withdraw its troops and weapons from countries that were not NATO members as of 27th of May 1997. This directive would effectively leave 14 countries which joined NATO in July 1997 without military protection. Among them are the Baltic states, which see Russia as an immediate threat. By this time, there were around 100,000 Russian troops on the Ukrainian border. The map proposed by Russia, which excluded NATO forces from 14 countries, bears a striking resemblance to the geopolitical division of Europe during the Cold War. This period, lasting 46 years from 1945 to 1991, was characterized by geopolitical confrontation between the US and the USSR. To dispel any doubt that Russia was issuing an ultimatum rather than offering a treaty, the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister bluntly suggested that NATO should pack its stuff. At the same time, Putin began to threaten to take certain military and technical measures in response to the aggression, asserting his right to do so. We remind you that by this time there were around 100,000 Russian troops on the Ukrainian border. Negotiations between NATO, the United States and Russia were inconclusive, with Russia insisting on full acceptance of its categorical demands. It explicitly stated that it would be forced to respond with equal military and technical measures. But in a statement delivered to the US ambassador by the Russian Foreign Ministry, it reiterated that it was not planning an invasion of Ukraine. But exactly a week later, at 4 a.m., on the 24th of February, a full-scale Russian invasion of independent Ukraine began. As can be seen, prior to the attack, Russia used the tactic of issuing threats and denying any plans for an attack. To predict Russia's next steps, let's try to analyze its current statements. On the one hand, the Russian Federation continues to issue a barrage of threats with the familiar military and technical measures, now targeting Finland and Sweden. Russia is almost literally declaring that Moldova could be the next target of its hybrid warfare tactics. Russia issues threats and demands the denazification and demilitarization of Poland and Lithuania. It consistently refers to Europe as an enemy and the Western world as an empire of deceit. At the same time, the Russian government is trying to convince the world that Russia is not a threat and is trying to avoid war. Russia is using the same strategy it used before the invasion of Ukraine. Simultaneous blackmail and denials, making it impossible to predict Russia's next move. At the same time, Russian rhetoric has become increasingly aggressive, with officials openly discussing the possibility of nuclear strikes on European capitals. It would be speculation to name the next country Putin decides to attack. However, we can envision what Putin's ideal Europe should look like by reading the document Russia has proposed to sign with the United States in 2021.